Today's lesson is a continuation of our previous lessons in our Understanding Electricity series. We've been working with capacitors. If you haven't seen those lessons, be sure to watch those before this. But as we were working with those caps, we ended up getting into a few different switches, and boy did they throw us for a wallop. So we're going to take a little bit of time today and work with some of those switches. And to start us off, let's get a real-world example. All right, let's start off with a pretty typical scenario here. We have two switches, and I'm just going to use a battery instead of AC power, and I've got a light bulb. Now, maybe you have like a set of steps, and we have one bulb up top, and you want to be able to control that bulb at the bottom of the steps and also the top. So if I'm at the bottom of the steps and maybe it's dark and I want to turn the light on, I can turn it on. I get to the top of the steps, I don't need that light anymore, I want to save some energy, I'll flip it the other way. But maybe I'm going back down, I can flip it. And I can continue to flip either switch all the time. Every time I flip a switch, I get the opposite condition. If the bulb is off, I flick a switch, it's now on. If I flick it again, it's now off. I've got two switches, a battery. Again, we're not using AC, but it's going to work exactly the same. This simple setup has thrown many DIYers and amateur electricians for an absolute fit. They have a tizzy and they can't figure it out. They're like, how does this work? That's what we're going to spend a little bit of time investigating. All right, let me clean this up. Maybe you want to replace one of your switches. You go to one of these big box stores, it's like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that, and you say, I need two switches. And the person there directs you and you pick two of these up. These are going to be about, I don't know, $2 or $3 each. They're incredibly cheap because we use them so often that the price comes down. Now, each one of these is really just a single pole, single throw switch. I like to use these knife switches. I think they're just easier to understand. We could see that it's got a single pole and I have a single throw. I can close the switch or I can open the switch. And that's really what we should be thinking about, completing the circuit or opening the circuit. Now, I also have these little terminals right here, and these terminals have a little piece of metal that connect them right to the metal of that switch. I can directly connect to the base of these switches or the terminal. They're connected by a little piece of metal. They're the same thing. Regardless, this single pole, single throw switch is identical to what you're seeing in this switch. You'll notice, again, I've got two termini there, and I've got a throw. Now, I can't tell exactly when it's open or closed because I've got this plastic and other stuff around it. But it tells me off and on. So in this case, this is going to end up saying off, which means in this case, it would be open. So I guess I should turn it around like this, all right? And then when I throw this switch down, it's the same thing as throwing this. Now it says on, and I've got a complete circuit. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take two of these, and we can use these switches, despite their the majority of their use being in household electricity that uses 120 volts. They work absolutely fine using a battery, and that's what we use today. I've got a battery. We'll get two of these switches, and I'll get a light bulb, and then I'll get some wires here, and that's going to lead us right to our quiz. For today's quiz, we've got two single pole, single throw switches. I've got a light bulb and I've got a battery. I've also got wires. I simply want to end up configuring a circuit so that I can simulate the light switches at the bottom and top of a staircase. In other words, when I throw the switch on the bottom, the light turns on. If I were to throw that switch again, the light would turn off. If I were at the top of the steps, it would do the same thing. So every time I throw one of the switches, whatever condition the light bulb is in, either on, it'll turn off. If it's off, it'll turn on. You hold your quiz up today. As always, mark your answer as completely as possible and list your level of confidence. Typical student responses are really a series of questions. They want to know if there was some kind of problem with the printer. They're like, look, you got a switch up here, here, you got a light bulb, and a battery and they're just haphazardly all over the place. Yeah, I did that on purpose. Just like when I hand supplies, I'm just going to put them down in any order so students can end up figuring out how to hook this up. I don't want to give anything away. So they'll say, can we physically hook these up or do we have to draw these out? You can do whatever you'd like. So one student will often say, well, this is going to be no problem at all because all we need to do is just hook them all in a line, kind of like make a giant loop, and everything's going to be fine. So let them do that. All right, the students are going to want to put this together. One of the things that you should probably do first is make sure your bulb and battery compatible. Make sure the bulb is working because it would be a problem if we get to the end and we realize, uh-oh, that bulb was burned out. So I have a 6-volt battery and a 6-volt light bulb. If you have a 9-volt battery and your light bulb can handle that, use that. If you've got a lower voltage bulb and you've got a single D battery, use that. Let's make sure it works. So I'll take one of these wires from the positive and I'll just connect it to one of the terminals of our light bulb. Got to make sure that this thing is A, working and not so bright that it's going to blind us. Be a real bummer to get to the end and realize, oh, our bulb was defective. So I'll just put this on here like so, and I've got to wiggle it just a little bit, make sure it's hitting the terminal inside. Okay, that's working. So now that I have that, maybe I'll just leave that together, or maybe not. Maybe I'll take that off for right now. Student would probably say, well, we know that we're going to end up using our battery here. I've got a positive side, so maybe I'll use a red. And in fact, I might use a longer red. I'm grabbing one of these off camera here, so I'll put that on our positive terminal right there. Again, sometimes these little pieces of plastic will pop off these alligator clips. This one doesn't bite too hard, so I can literally just hold it in place and then put that insulator back over. These are not the most expensive wires. They'll do for our purposes. One of the students said, just put these all in line and everything should work fine. And I think they're basing some of this on what we did with our capacitor work, and kind of makes sense. So let's just hook these right on here. Might be easier to get to the bottom of that screw in that manner. And then maybe from there, I'll just take maybe a white wire from this switch over to this switch, like so. And then from there, I'll go to the light bulb. Maybe I'll use a different color. Maybe I'll use yellow. And maybe I'll hook it this way. And from there, maybe I'll use one of these black wires right here. And I can connect from this bulb. If I can get that on there, that's a pretty good connection. And I'll take it over here. And right now I've got my switches, one's off, one's on. Actually, they were kind of in the middle there. I'll just put them both to off at first. And let's see if this works. Put that on there. The light bulb is not working. If I throw a switch, oh, not working. So it should be going on and then off. And then when I take this one over here, it should go on or off. Now there's a whole bunch of different combinations, so the students are going to say, wait a second, we kept doing them individually, but what if I were to throw that one on, and then I could throw that one on, and maybe, oh, our bulb was a little loose, so I got to redo all of this again. So that works, on and off, and then this one, but this one doesn't work. Now neither of them is working. If I put that on that way, oh, look. Okay, so this is a little bit, oh, it's kind of working now. So let's do the test as we had indicated. Picture this is at the bottom of the floor and that's at the top of the floor. So this one I should be able to turn on and off, and that works. No, it's not working. Sometimes it does, but other times it doesn't. And that's really confusing, and just trying to figure out, now this side isn't working at all. And this side doesn't seem to be working either now. Maybe I'll leave that one closed. Okay, that's working again. This can get really confusing. So the students might say, you know what, even though this looks really simple, maybe we should try to draw it out. Let's do that. All right, to draw this out, maybe I'll put this down to give us a little bit more room. And we're just going to draw these in order. Maybe I'll put the battery here, a switch, and then I've got my light bulb right here. So whenever you're drawing, it is nice to try to keep things straight, but don't stress about it too much. Maybe I'll come over here. We'll put our first switch and we'll make that about 4 long. Then I'll go over here, make that switch about 4 long, and then I'll put maybe our bulb right here, and then I'll just go over to here. Now I can end up putting a little bit of a switch right there. That's one switch, and then I'll make this one about the same length also, maybe about there, something like that. And I could put a little ball here, and then maybe I'll make this bulbish. Now what I can do is square this off. Maybe I'll take it down here to about there. And we'll put our battery in here. Something about right here. Here we go. Connect this right there. And then I'll put my battery. I'll make different lengths here. I'll do this one about that length. This one about this length, double it. And then another short. And then a long. Something like that. Connected. All right. Now, I might also want to call this one switch 1, and that would be switch 2. All right. Now that you've got this drawn, see if the students can come up with different ideas on how to figure out what's happening. All right. After some contemplation, students will say, we need to figure out a good graphic that helps us what's going on here. So you might even help them out a little bit. In this case, we might do something called like a truth table. And these are really helpful. So we can end up saying, look, I've got a couple different configurations that I can put this. So let's think about this. I could have 2 up, 2 down, 1 up, and then I can switch them. So I think I have 4 there. Let's see if that does everything. Keeping things neat again, let's see if we can make a little table here. I'll take this out to about the same length. And then here I'll end up writing the configuration. And maybe we could put a little picture underneath each one of what we mean by that. So let's see, this is... Oh, that was off to the side a little bit, but I could put my switch 1, whoops, switch 1, and then I could do switch 2, and then I could do the output. So my first configuration, I'll just use what I have right here. I'll just draw a little line right here, and then right here again, and I've got both of these angling up. So I've got an arrow here, and I've got an arrow here. So in other words, our first arrow is just going to be our switch 1. I think I could do this smaller here. I could say, well, if they're both up or in the open position, it turns out that current is not going to be able to flow. So in that case, our output would be nothing. Now, there is like a reason why we have switches. Often they'll have a 0 on them or a 1, and those are the 2 binary states. In this case, we'll say 0. Nothing happens right there. So that output is a 0. The next one is when I have one switch thrown, but not the other. So maybe I'll make a little dot here, a little dot there. So let's go ahead and switch this one straight across. So this one's going to be across there. And maybe I could put a little dot here, showing that I've got my arrow, and that one is actually thrown, but this one is not. So in that case, I've got 1 closed, 1 open. So here I've got 1 closed, switch 1, but switch 2 is open. And because I have 1 here, well, I can't jump that gap. And so again, I end up with a 0 right there. Now, the next one I could take, I already have one down. Let me put the other one down also. So that one's just going to be straight across. Can draw that out kind of like a straight line, showing that I've got that one closed and that one closed. I could put my little dots here if I'd like. And in that case, I think the bulb is going to light. I think that's when it was lighting. So I end up getting that switch is closed, that switch is closed. Now my output, I really do have light there. So I can draw like a light bulb lighting up, but normally we'll just put a 1. And that's why you'll see switches with a 0, that means off, and a 1, which means on. So I do get 1 here. But really, if I'm switching each time, I almost need like a 50-50. And right now, it's not looking like that. So now I can have this one up and that one closed. So I'll do the same for the second half of this, but the first part is now going to be open. So here I've got my arrow here, and this one is going to end up being up at an angle like so. And so this is going to end up being an open switch, and this is going to end up being our closed switch, and that gives us a 0 again. Boy, that's not going to give us what we want. So think of this as being a table that we're using graphically. We can end up putting our symbols right in there and seeing what our output is. All right, so it's not going to work. I can see right away. And now the students are going to be saying, there's got to be another way to do this. Give them a few minutes to play around and see what they can come up with. After some time and students playing around, they might say, wait a second, while these switches are side by side, there's another way to put them side by side. And they might, here, I'll disconnect the battery. What if we somehow, instead of putting them in a line with one another, we put them side by side this way? And that's really great. This is called series. So this is more of a series configuration. What they're talking about is putting them in parallel. So yeah, let's maybe have them draw that out. All right, a student might approach and say, I think I can draw this out. We're going to do the bottom part pretty much the same. Let's see if this bottom is 41. So I'll put a little line here. Let's see if we one. Got our battery again. Maybe they're not exactly the same size, but in this case, I can flip one of these independent of the other. This is called parallel. Now, before we go any further, see if you can pause here and make the truth table for the parallel circuit. All right, let's line this up. Let's see if we can get this started right here. All right, now that I've got this cleaned up a little bit, our first one I'm going to have an arrow up, and this one I'm going to have an arrow up. So they're both going to be in this configuration. I'll put them this way, and then over here I'll have them going along. So they're both in the open position, so I'll draw them rather steep. So S1 is going to be an arrow up, and S2 is going to be an arrow up. Now, current's not going to be able to flow either way, so our output is a 0 there. The next one I can close the top one, so I'll just make that straight across, put my arrow there, and the bottom one I'll have open just like I had before, and that is going to end up, I guess I can pull these together at the end here and then end up putting a little line on each, something like that. when I put these together, you can see that current will be able to flow from one of them. So in this case, current will flow up here. So if I have one that is closed, and then if I have one that is open, that is going to be on. All right, let's see if they're both closed. So in this case, it would just be straight across closed, straight across closed. And I could draw this kind of quickly. So they're both going to end up being closed here. So again, that is going to be an on position. Now what I'll do is I'll leave, let's see, the bottom one closed and the top one open. So in that case, I'll put the bottom one closed, put my arrow there. My top one, though, is going to end up being open, like so. And in that case, it's still going to end up having power. So the S1 is going to be at a bit of an angle, like so. This switch 2 is going to be closed. This one's open, this one's closed. And that is going to be kind of like the opposite. Notice I had only one state that was going to light up the bulbs here. Now I've got 3, but that symmetry doesn't make sense, because whenever I end up flicking one or the other, I should have a 50-50 overall chance of turning that bulb on or off. Not a chance, but it should work 50%. Okay, let's give the students a chance to see if they can set anything else up. Right. After some time, we can see the students struggling to put this together, and they might say, we'll put this on here, and then we'll connect this here, and then we'll put our battery back on. Well, this switch isn't even part of that, and they'll look back at the board and they'll look at these configurations and they'll say, maybe I need to put it on this one over here. No, that's not going to work. Maybe I need to connect the 2 of these somehow, like here. And then maybe this one goes here. Hold on. Pretty soon they're going to throw up their hands and they're going to say, I don't think this is ever going to work. I don't think this can work. And I'll put this on, and I'll put this one over here. Oh, it lit up. And if I throw that, no, that doesn't work. That one doesn't work. That one doesn't work. Okay, that's not working. After some time, your students are going to say, you know what? I don't think it's possible to do this. These little switches, these little alligator clips can be difficult to use. But anyhow, after some time, they're going to say, there's just no way to get these knife switches, these single pole, single throw switches to work as a light that you could turn on or off, either from being upstairs or downstairs as we have directed. And that is exactly why so many amateur electricians, DIYers, and so on end up feeling so frustrated. It turns out you can't do it with these switches. And that's what we're going to have to work on for our next lesson. All right, that's your quiz, and that's your lesson for today. Be sure to join us for part 2. Thank you for watching another Idealized Science Institute video. We are a nonprofit organization. If you like what you've seen, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want, leave a comment below. It's helpful to us. If you can financially support us, go to our website and hit the donate button. If you can't, simply by sharing these videos with other teachers and students in your life will be helpful. While at our website, you'll find that we have our Idealized Science Institute book that'll help you engage your students in dialogic discourse. There you'll also find we have a podcast where we break down educational research. We also have long-form lessons. If you're a teacher, you can watch these and go in the very next day and enact these. Along with this, we also have many other resources, including more quick quizzes. So thank you for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one.